Hey y'all, it's Kelly from Dixie Darlins, and today I'm going to be doing one of these door hangers, and this is the 15-inch circle from Counterculture, and I've just laid the tape down, but this is the 15-inch, so I've just measured 7.5 inches down here. I made a mark, and I'm using my leveling ruler to make marks on either edge here. That's kind of how I did it before I laid my tape down. So for whatever reason, I didn't record when I laid the tape down. I was like, oh, well, at least let me show you guys how I did it. So I just made little marks. I'm actually laying the tape down here in the center, but I'm actually going to pull that back up. But I find it easier to do it this way to kind of work my way out from the center line. So I'm actually going to put tape on the top and the bottom of this and then pull this tape up. So I'm just kind of measuring where my center is. I just want to make sure that I've got everything pretty square here, you know, vertically and horizontally, that is the center, before I kind of work my way out from that. And then I was just kind of showing you guys here that I did just go into Cricut, and I have the 24-inch mat, and so I actually do print this off about pretty much 15 inches wide. So I went ahead and purchased, this was just a decal that I purchased on Etsy at Hey Y'all, and I don't know if you have the mat or not, or knew that that's a an option, but I do have the 24-inch mat, and so I just created the SVG in Design Space, and then I rotated it sideways so it would print off on the longer mat, since it obviously wouldn't fit on the 12 by 12-inch mat. And so you can see here that I'm just basically using that center tape that I laid down as my guide. To me, I'm just not very good at straight lines. Y'all know from watching me lay vinyl wraps down, I'm not very good at straight lines. So I do better if I get one straight line, and then I can just work my way out with this painter's tape. So my center section is basically going to be, this is the 1.5 inch wide, and I've laid two pieces, so your center is going to be kind of 3 inches wide. And I kind of kept that in mind when I was sizing my decal. I knew that I wanted it to go from one side to the other, but then I also wanted to stretch it a little bit where it would fit in that 3-inch space in the center too. So I'm actually going to paint that section first. And this one is the circle that has the raised board on the other side, but I decided I wanted to do this side for my Hey Y'all. And I'm just going to take some of the Brea Reese brown alcohol ink, and I'm basically just taking a chip brush, and I'm just going to kind of brush it on there. It soaks into the wood pretty good, but I didn't have to do a second coat. It basically just took me one coat of this. So I just chose to use the alcohol inks. You definitely can use, if you wanted to do brown acrylic paint, or you actually could spray paint this and then do alcohol inks over it probably to get more of the wood grain effect. I just knew that I was going to be laying the Hey Y'all SVG over it anyway, and I'm going to put this big bow on it. So I didn't want too much distraction going on. I just wanted it to be a contrasting color, because I am going to go in and paint where my tape is laying right now. I'm going to paint those two sections a lighter color, so I basically just wanted the darker brown. And it does take a little bit of alcohol ink. It soaks in there, but I found it was a little bit easier just to apply it directly to the board there, and then just brush it on with this little brush. And after I've done applying my alcohol ink, I am going to go in with just this apple barrel black acrylic paint from Walmart, and it does provide a really pretty, almost like a matte finish when it dries. So I wanted to do that, and then in the center I'm going to do this lamb's wool that's a contrasting color. It just I thought it would tie everything in with, I'm going to use this leopard print wire ribbon that I found that I just totally loved. So I thought, well, let me do some black and some brown, but then let me do a little contrast color also to make it pop a little bit. And after I'm done painting those two sections, I do let it dry for about an hour, and then I'm going to come back and pull my paint off before I go into my lighter sections. So after I've let it dry for about an hour, I'm going to go in and just pull my painter's tape off, and then I'm going to retape the sections above and below. So I wanted to make sure that black paint was really dry. I knew the alcohol ink wasn't at risk at pulling up, but I wanted to make sure that black paint was really good and dry before I laid my painter's tape back down. And then you can see here, the alcohol ink does have a tendency to run a little bit, and I knew it probably would, so I'm just going back and taping exactly where my tape had been before, basically. And if it ran a little bit, I'm not too worried about it, because this pop of color paints will cover it up. But I would just, word of caution here, when you're using the alcohol inks, be careful when you're next to your tape, because it will tend to run up under there a little bit. Then I'm also going to take off these black sections here after I make sure that they're really dry. And this does dry with like a really pretty matte finish, it seemed to, on this textured piece. And so I like how it was. And I'm actually going to go around on the sides too just so I have that line, especially with painting the lamb's wool. I wanted to make sure that it was like very crisp and even around the edges of the door hanger. Then you can see here how I'm wrapping it around the edges. I did not do it with the other colors because I thought I could go back up and touch them up a little bit, but I wanted the white to be like a very crisp line at the top and the bottom. And I've actually got this elevated up on 2 just little bottles that I just set it up just so it'll be elevated off my table so I could paint those edges. And I am using this Pop of Color paint that is the sister company to Counterculture DIY. And I love these paints. I've painted my table with them. They have some beautiful neons and these lamb's wool and blush, and they've got a light turquoise. These colors are just beautiful. So I knew I wanted to use this one on here. So I'm just gonna go ahead, and it provides pretty good coverage and it goes on really nice and smooth. It doesn't leave a lot of streak marks. Sometimes I have to be careful when I'm painting on like a smooth surface with that, but this is really good. And I was really just trying to get along the edges to start with, just to make sure I got that really crisp edge. It wouldn't, you know, leak out around on my darker colors. And then I'm just gonna do that really quick. And I'll let this dry for a couple of hours just because I was working on something else, but it was dry pretty much in an hour where I could have taken my tape off. I just want to make sure that I didn't pull any of the, you know, the paint off if it has a tendency to be wet where it would, you know, kind of run off to the side. So I made sure it was good and dry before I pulled the tape off this section too. And then I'm going to transition over here while I'm letting that dry and I still have my paint out. I'm taking my decal that I printed off, and I just printed it out on Oracal, just permanent vinyl, and I'm taking my sanding block and I'm just sanding it down a little bit because this was a white vinyl. I didn't have the exact color, but I wanted it to match those stripes. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this paint. After I've sanded it down, I'm just wiping it off with just a paper towel. I didn't put rubbing alcohol or anything on it, just the paper towel. And I'm just going to go in with a little bit of paint, and I'm just going to paint right over this. So I just wanted to scuff up the surface a little bit. I'd seen Jessica Flynn do this. She actually did it with spray paint, but I thought if it works with spray paint, let me try it with this, and it worked really well. So I just do a really light coat over it. I didn't want it to be thick because I didn't want it when I pulled it off for any of the paint to come off with it, which a little bit does on my transfer tape, but it still doesn't transfer to the board. So it did pretty well, and I just needed a little bit of that tint to it, right? I just needed it not to be so stark white. And once I get it all painted, I just let it dry. Same thing, just as long as the board was dry, and I'd basically just finished painting the board. So I thought, well, let me go ahead and do this and let them both be drying at the same time. Okay, well now we're moving to the bow section, y'all. I'm not gonna lie, y'all know I always tell you the truth. Bows are not my crafting gift, so it took me a few attempts, but stay at it because it did end up being worth it. I just kind of had to play around with how I wanted it to look. I had 4 different ribbons. I had this leopard linen, I had the black linen, and then I had the tan kind of crochet, and then I had the black and white herringbone. So I end up taking them, and I started out with about 21-inch strips, and I ended up cutting them down to about 18-inch strips. And then I fold about a third over, if you can kind of see there. So like two-thirds of it's laying on the table, and I fold the other third over. And I'm gonna do this with each one, and I'm gonna make sure that they're folded over about the same place, because when I kind of scrunch them up and tie them together, I want the ends to, you know, I want them to stay in place. And that way you don't have so much bulk on the bottom as having 2 pieces. That way you just have 1 piece on the bottom that's kind of be your little kicker piece. So I ended up just doing them in the same rotation of like the leopard, the crochet, the black, the herringbone. And then I stack them on top of each other again, where I'm doing the leopard, the crochet, the black, and the herringbone. And I'm actually gonna do 8 pieces in one and 4 pieces in another, and then I'm gonna combine the bows together, if that makes sense. So if you try to do them all together, it just made the bow, it was too bulky. So I ended up, because I tried it that way, trust me, I would tell y'all the truth. I did try it that way, and it was so bulky that it wouldn't lay flat on my door hanger. So I thought, okay, let me try this another way. So you can kind of see here, I've got like 8 pieces here, so I've got 2 rotations of them, right, of how I've stacked them up. And I'm just gonna kind of squinch them up there together. You can see like right at the bottom where I've folded over that 1/3 piece there. And I'm gonna squinch that up, but I'm gonna do 8 on one piece and then 4 on the other. And then once I kind of get those all fluffed out individually, then I put them together. So I'm just gonna kind of let y'all watch this. There's not a lot of explaining really that I can do. other than I just kind of had to play around with it. I'll be honest with y'all, I watched a couple of tutorials on bow making and they had all different kind of techniques. I just kind of had to figure out what worked for me. And like you can see, I tried to do them all together and it was just going to be it was too bulky. I couldn't get it to lay down flat. So I ended up going, let me separate these out, and I'm just going to do like 2 separate bows. But I found that doing more of them on one and then just separating the 4 pieces of ribbon out on the other one, it looked more cohesive than trying to do half and half, you know, and then you've kind of got a break in the center. This way you can kind of just fill in with this little side bow over here that I'm creating. And then, so you can just see here that these are just like little twist ties, y'all. I've seen people use zip ties, crafting wire. I just happen to have these little twisty ties handy. You know, they come on electronic equipment, all kinds of stuff. These just happen to be handy, and I knew they were going to be hidden because the bows are going to be so big. So I just squeeze them, you know, twist them as tight as I can. The bigger one I left a little bit loose to start with, just so I could kind of work with the pieces, because I didn't want them to all just be, you know, I didn't want, once you fluff them out, I didn't want them to just all be all in the same direction. I kind of want to be able to move them a little bit. So I did leave the bigger one a little bit looser until I kind of got it like I wanted it. And then I went back in and tightened it up so they would stay really well. And some of y'all might be professional bow makers and probably could give me some lessons. I knew what I wanted the end product to look like. I didn't know exactly how I was going to get there, but it ended up being fine. I mean, like, how can you go wrong with like wired leopard ribbon anyway? So all this ribbon is wired. I will link it all in the description box below. I got it all at Michael's. I mean, you can definitely, there's so many options. Oh my goodness. I think I stood there at Michael's for like an hour just looking at ribbon options. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, there's already so many glitter and vinyl options with me. I'm like, now I gotta have ribbon options, but it's just like, there's so many ways you can mix and match patterns. So I feel like you really can't go wrong when you're doing this. I was just trying to do 2 that were predominantly like the black tones and 2 that were predominantly like the khaki tones. So, but I can't wait to see. I hope you guys will like share a lot of your creations with me, because I started looking at these door hangers and I was like, oh my goodness, the options are so endless. I mean, like for every season, I feel like now I've got to have one of these. And so back to my bow, I just try to, you know, pull one direction, one the other, one direction, one the other. I didn't want all the leopard to be in the same spot. You know, I wanted it to, my little OCD comes out and I'm like, I want them to be, you know, random, but yet very strategically random. So you can kind of see I'm just playing around with them here to try to figure out the best way to combine the 2 and which direction the little side bow over here needs to go, so the leopard, you know, ribbons aren't side by side. And so, you know, you guys can play with it. Y'all figure out what I'm saying. Just trying to explain how I was doing it. And then once I get it like I want it, and I see they're going to lay pretty well next to each other, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to take another little twisty tie here, and I'm just going to combine those 2. So I definitely just set it here, just kind of, you know, looking at it, making sure it was going to be okay. And then I just take another twist tie and just twist those 2 together. And now that it took me 14 hours to make that bow, I'm just kidding, y'all. I will say that I had to step away from the bow for a minute. I was like, okay, it is time to step away from the ribbon for a few minutes and take a break. So while I'm doing that, and my paint has dried, I'm gonna come back to apply my decal. And y'all, I just laid a piece of transfer tape down. You can see that some of the paint is lifting up on the transfer tape, which I knew probably would, but it did not transfer to my door hanger. So I basically know this is going to fit from end to end, so I'm just trying to get it centered top to bottom, and then I know it should lay pretty well from end to end, so there wasn't a lot of centering to go on with that. And you can see, like, it was on my transfer tape, but it didn't really stick to the wood, so I didn't seem to have a problem with that with this pop of color paints. It worked really well, and it stuck to my transfer tape, but it didn't stick to my board. And then these are just little cotton pumpkin pine cone florals that I found at Michael's also. I was looking for something kind of seasonal, but I didn't want it to just be like Halloween or Thanksgiving. So I'm actually going to do it where I can take the pumpkins in and out. So I literally, y'all, there may be a better way to do this, but I decided I was going to go with the old glue gun, because I was like, the old glue gun does not let me down very often. So where I've gotten the bottom of the little ribbons separated out, I'm just filling that with glue, and I'm going to stick it on there, and it stuck perfectly. I had no issues with it. So I'm going to place that on there first, and then just kind of work all these little pieces. And I've gone in and just the little floral things, I didn't want the whole thing on there, so I went in and just trimmed off the ones that I wanted, because some of them were a little too orange for what I like on here. And so I thought, well, let me just kind of clip off, and I had a little piece, I had some little wire cutters. You probably could use scissors. I just have these little wire cutters that I use for jewelry, and I just clipped off the, you know, individual pieces. And so before I glue them on, I'm trying to get an idea of how I want to arrange everything. I didn't want it to go up too much. I wanted it to more go out, was kind of how I had how I had it in my mind. Now, was it going to translate or not? It was yet to be seen. And then you can see the little, I don't know what those little brown styrofoam ball things are, but I ended up, like, once I got it all together, I was like, you know, I'm just not feeling those. So I ended up just clipping those off. I left the leaves that were on there, but I didn't like those. So I'm just going to go back in with my glue gun, and I did, you can see I left about 3 inches of the stem on there because I wanted to be able to glue that part on where, you know, it didn't look like the actual cotton ball was glued on or the pine cone was glued on. I wanted them to stick out from the board a little bit. So I left more of the stem on there, and I just put a little hot glue on the end of it, and I just stick it down in there, and it like worked perfect. You couldn't see it. And then I'm just gonna like maneuver the leaves around a little bit to, you know, try to make it look cohesive here. You can see I had to go back up and touch up a little glue gun areas from here to there, but and then I just took some twine, and this twine's like from Walmart, and you definitely could put hooks on the back of this. For me, I just thought it's gonna hang, like it's kind of gonna be under a covered area for me on my front door, so it's not gonna like get too much wind because it's totally covered and sheltered from the wind and rain. So I thought I'm just gonna hot glue this on here, and that way if I want to go back and do something on the other side, you actually could just pull that off. Because see, this other side of the board is textured, and I really had an idea that I was gonna make this two-sided, is what I originally thought. But this glue will peel off, so if I needed it to. And I could sand it a little bit. So I was like, okay, instead of like nailing something in here and then totally ruining this side of the board for me, I'm just gonna hot glue a little twine on here. It's just gonna be hanging on my door. It's not going to get too much weather on it, but you definitely could put hooks on the back of this. You could even do little nails in there and then just tie it around there. So there's my final design, y'all. I was so happy with how it turned out. I was so excited to get this on my door. I'd been wanting a wreath. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Please come join my Dixie Darlins Tumblr's Facebook group. Share with me your creations. Go like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all again.